Good evening. Welcome to our study tonight. As we begin our Genesis study, obviously, as we do every week, we'll go in the news. So the first one I want to give you is this one. The U.S. government spies on thousands of Americans' mail every year. The U.S. Postal Service, USPS, has been spying on thousands of Americans' mail every year for a decade, including letters and parcels, and have provided citizens information to police and elements of the national security apparatus, the Washington Post investigation found. Tens of thousands of requests have been submitted to USPS since 2015. Following such requests from the IRS, the FBI, the Department of Homeland Security, and other agencies, the USPS has shared names, addresses, and other findings from the exteriors of Americans' packages and envelopes without court orders. I know you didn't know this was going on. The surveillance system is known as the Mail Covers Program, ostensibly used to track down suspects or evidence. However, the investigation reads, a decade's worth of records provided exclusively to the Washington Post in response to a congressional probe show Postal Service officials have received more than 60,000 requests from federal agents and police officers since 2015, and they rarely say no to those requests. Each request can cover days or weeks of mail sent to or from a person's address, and 97% of the requests were approved, according to the data. Postal inspectors recorded more than 312,000 letters and packages between 2015 and 2023, the record shows. Wow, I don't know about you, but you got to be careful what you order now from Amazon or any business for that matter, like a gun or survival equipment, because they know they've been monitoring it. Officials chose to provide this surveillance service and to keep postal customers in the dark about the fact that they have been subject to monitoring. This month, Gary Barksdale, the chief postal inspector, refused to change the policy, but furnished nearly a decade's worth of data showing that postal inspectors, federal agencies, and state and local police forces made an average of about 6,700 requests a year, and that the inspectors additionally reported and recorded data from about another 35,000 pieces of mail, the Post reported. So, mail contains a myriad of personal and sensitive information, such as with whom American citizens are corresponding, places of worship you attend, the bills they're paying, social causes to which they contribute, as well as what the political views they hold. So we're watching right now your mail being inspected. And basically, there's no privacy in your mail. That's pretty shocking when you think about it. Let's go a little bit further. Let's talk about Israel. The West Wing worry about Netanyahu's upcoming speech to Congress. An article published in Politico on Saturday claims that the administration of Washington is very worried about Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's speech next month to a joint session of the U.S. Congress. According to the authors and their nameless contacts, the White House fears that Bibi might take the opportunity to criticize President Joe Biden for not sufficiently supporting Israel's war effort. I hope he does. It's terrifying to the White House indeed, because they do not want that to come out. Frictions have deepened between Biden and Netanyahu since the start of the Israeli-Hamas war, with Biden aides increasingly believing that the Israeli leader is prolonging the conflict to stay in power. By the way, that's ridiculous. It asserts, and that he would prefer Donald Trump return to the White House. That's not ridiculous. He definitely would. Yes, Team Biden's increasingly believing the mantra of Israel's anybody but Bibi protesters and their colluders across the pond, that Netanyahu doesn't care about the 120 remaining hostages in Gaza, where they're being physically, psychologically, and sexually abused, or about the IDF troops risking and losing their lives to feed Hamas and free the captives. Obviously, that's absolutely not true. The accusation isn't merely immoral, its premise is totally false. Politico states that Biden's aides think Netanyahu is going to use the platform to address his audience at home as much as the United States. And again, you're seeing a lot of spin coming out of the White House. They're in a panic mode right now, especially after the debate. They don't know which way's up, and so they're scared of everything. Bibi's plea 8 years ago that the U.S. not reach an agreement with the evil regime in Tehran indeed enraged America's Iran appeasers. Nor was it answered until Donald Trump took the reins in 2017 and ripped up the disastrous deal. Netanyahu standing up in this way to the Obama administration so impressed the Gulf states way back when, which feared and emboldened Iran also, that it turned out to be the precursor to the Abraham Accords between Israel and several Arab neighbors. But obviously, the White House right now is very scared of him coming. Let's go a little bit with war. The EMP threat to the West continues to grow. An EMP is essentially a large nuclear bomb that explodes in the outer atmosphere. It's in a cone-shaped area comes down below. All electrical and electronics devices fail. The area could be predetermined and arranged beforehand. So for an example, an attack could be focused on greater Chicago or the entire Mideast. It would be explode way above it, and that cone shape would come down and render all of those electronic equipment not operable. The explosion actually causes no immediate deaths, but only after 10 days, many people will die due to lack of food because refrigeration will be impossible. Water, most water is delivered by electrical pumps. Working sewer systems, communications, transportation, not to mention that all your iPads and iPhones will be out. Russia is now perfecting such a weapon. They are sending a nuclear device into space mounted on a satellite. It will be ready for use if and when Russia deems it necessary. We have no defense against it. We cannot stop it. Developing this weapon is in serious violation of the treaties signed in the past. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin knows that Biden administration is incapable of making or following through on any threats. And that's our big threat right now, is that Biden is obviously ineffective. We've seen it the last couple nights and the news reports, even the Democrats are saying it. And let me tell you, that is an open window to our enemies. And I'm concerned about the next several months leading up to the election. Regarding Iran, in that, America survived the Cold War because of the doctrine of mutual assured destruction. It's called MAD. No one wanted to be the recipient of a massive reciprocal nuclear attack. Despite the Cold War arms buildup, not a single nuclear missile was fired. We tend to think similarly about Iran, but we are completely wrong. The Iranian mullahs believe that their 12th imam, the occluded messianic figure termed the Mahdi, is on earth right now, but is hiding. The Iranian regime is convinced that they must make him appear and manifest himself. It's a religious obligation in Shiite Islam, and they believe only a war will do it. So MAD is no threat to them. They see such destruction as a victory, a win for them. Americans don't understand this way of thinking, nor that it is in service of Iran's ultimate objective of the Islamification of the West. What about the Sunni Saudi Arabia? Well, its leader, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, is trying very hard to bring his country into the 21st century. He's accomplished this by eliminating radical Islam and proposing a more moderate form of the faith. All Sunni beliefs and directives globally come from Saudi Arabia. They are very different from Iran. Note that none of the above has anything to do with Israel, Gaza, or the current war. It has been brewing for a while. The alliance of North Korea, China, Russia, and Iran is focused on destroying American superpower status. At the moment, Iran in particular is creating havoc in the Middle East with their proxy groups and terror groups of the Houthis, Hezbollah, and Hamas. So basically what we're seeing right now is we're seeing a buildup of our enemies, and they're doing things that we don't have the capability to match. And so when I tell you that war seems extremely imminent, we are extremely vulnerable right now. And again, I pray for these next several months, because that's the weakness that we have. Let me go a little bit further and tell you this. Military parallels. Ancient Rome and the current state of the U.S. military. I've talked about this before, how America is actually paralleling Rome in its decline. Well, this one is specific about our military. When Publius Licinius Valerius, known to history as Valerian, the emperor, became emperor in 253 AD, the Roman Empire was in the midst of a crisis of the 3rd century. Plagues, inflation, escalated conflicts, growing social tensions, rising crime, declining trade, and a struggling economy. Does that sound familiar? But Valerian had decades of political experience, so everyone thought he'd saved the day. Also sounds familiar. Instead, he continued bankrupting the treasury with huge deficits. He raised taxes. He debased the currency, which caused inflation to soar. And he demanded ideological conformity. Dissenters were arrested and severely punished, and many had their property confiscated by the state. The imperial borders were also a mess. Listen to this. Barbarian tribes were coming across the northern border in what was tantamount to a full-scale invasion of Roman territory, while the Sassanid Persians were invading Rome's Arabian provinces from the empire's eastern border. Their borders were fluid. Everybody was coming in. Rome's once legendary military was also shrinking. In fact, the empire had a historic military recruitment crisis on its hands. Man, this doesn't sound familiar. I don't know what does. To address these challenges, Valerian expanded the use of mercenaries. He essentially bribed new recruits, including and especially foreigners, offering money, citizenship, and land grants in exchange for serving in the military. This marked a clear and obvious turning point in Rome's history. Empires last because they sustain their strength, and that strength requires both a prosperous economy and a powerful military. And it's increasingly difficult to have a powerful military when no one wants to serve. The U.S. military, right now, finds itself in a similar position today. In fact, the U.S. in general is going through a similar period as Rome's crisis of the 3rd century, complete with political scandal and instability, inflation, massive deficits, border incursions, violence, and even a pandemic. And the parallels between Rome's 3rd century military and the state of the U.S. military today are quite strong. Last year, the U.S. military missed its recruitment goal by 41,000 troops, which is staggering and a record high figure. The active duty U.S. military is now the smallest it's been since 1940. As a result, mission readiness is down. Some politicians have even suggested offering citizenship to illegal immigrants in exchange for serving in the U.S. military. Can't get any worse. And young people don't want to serve because they're being taught to hate America. A high school in New Jersey and in Berkeley, California were recently caught, for example, teaching that Hamas is a peaceful resistance movement and Israel is genocidal. The teachers union, covering school districts in Portland, Oregon, recently published lesson plans which praised Hamas, yet completely failed to mention their October 7th terrorist attack murdering innocent Israelis. So by the time students make it to university, they're filled with hate for their country. It's so palpable that the supreme leader of Iran, one of America's biggest enemies, recently praised American university students. Quote, "You are currently a part of the resistance front," the Ayatollah told Americans' youth, "and have waged an honorable battle despite the relentless pressure of your government." Meanwhile, the patriotic Americans who filled the military ranks for decades have been maligned as extremists. These are the very people who love America so much that they were ready to die for their country and kill the enemies of their country, which is no less consequential. Yet instead of embracing these people the military so desperately needs, the government practically lampoons them and their core beliefs. The Army used to have slogans like "Be all you can be" and "Army strong." Those have been replaced by recruiting ads about soldiers with lesbian moms. Even the CIA recruits by catering to the woke, diversity and inclusion crowd. It's bizarre to see recruiting ads tailored to radicals who hate their country and have no interest in serving. And gee, what a surprise, the woke recruiting campaign has failed. Now the Defense Department has resorted to bribing people, just like ancient Rome. Of course, the military has long offered recruitment bonuses and college tuition in exchange for service, but it was typically one of the reasons to join, not the reason. That's no longer the case. Just ask soldiers who make TikTok videos about why they joined. One said, "I joined for a Camaro. I joined to pay my bills. I joined to pay my money." Again, strong nations need both a robust economy and a powerful military. America's future economic tsunami, the government itself forecasts the national debt to grow beyond $55 trillion in the next decade. Social Security will run out of money in 9 years. The U.S. dollar is on the road to losing its global reserve status very soon. The challenges plaguing the U.S. military, however, add yet another dimension to America's problems. Mission readiness is down. Most major weapon systems, from fighter jets to naval warships, are rapidly becoming obsolete, and there's no money to replace them. And this recruiting crisis continues to worsen. These challenges are fixable, though, and there still is a very narrow window of opportunity to do so. But at the moment, it doesn't appear that the people in charge even recognize the problems, let alone have the willingness to solve them. Man, do we need administration change. Speaking of the military draft debate, mandating women into instruments of war. I told you about this before, but I'm going to just give you a little bit more, an update on it. An amendment to a must-pass bill pending before Congress right now would force women to register for the military draft, a move opposed by most Americans and 2 out of 3 females. The current draft, opening the potential that the government would conscript both sexes in the event of a military draft. Both young men and women, 18 to 26 years old, automatically being registered with the Selective Service. Many women would not even know that they are signed up for the draft until they get the draft notice, and I'll tell you why in a moment. Polls show that the majority of Americans, and the overwhelming majority of women, oppose drafting girls in their teens or 20s into combat. This has become one of those reoccurring issues on the left that never goes away. They never drop it. They just keep doing it until they get their way. It's kind of like a kid pestering his parents until he wears them out. The measure shows Democrats trying to blur the gender lines and using the military not to fight and win wars, but as a place of social experimentation. The amendment touched off massive backlash among congressional incumbents. Senator Mike Lee of Utah said, "This will happen over my dead body. Real men don't draft women." Sam Brown, the Republican candidate challenging 1st Democratic Senator Jackie Rosen in Nevada, called her support for drafting women absurd, unbelievable, and unacceptable. Democratic Senate candidates facing difficult re-elections in Ohio, Pennsylvania, Montana have backed way away from this notion, yet the motion enjoys some bipartisan success. It's really kind of unbelievable that you see it. Richard Nixon, let's go way back, instituted the all-volunteer military in 1973. He ended the draft. And Gerald Ford stopped mandating that young men register with Selective Service in April of 1975. When you were, I think it was 18 years old, you had to go down and register. So they knew who they could draft. But with recruitment falling and the Soviet Union invading Afghanistan, President Jimmy Carter reinstituted the need for men to sign up for Selective Service. These last few years have been the worst in recruitment for all volunteer force. The erosion of military recruitment reflects society's broader indifference to young men being disengaged from society. So you've got two main ways that the Selective Service signs young men up. Really listen to this, because this is why people won't know and they'll be drafted even if they didn't go and sign up. One is through the application for a driver's license at the state level. So as soon as you get a driver's license, your name goes to the federal government and you get signed up should there be a draft. The number of young men aged 16 to 19 who are getting driver's license, listen to this, has declined from 64% to 40% in the last 25 years for that specific reason. Compelling women to fight without their consent would not only violate women's autonomy, but transform historic norms governing women's function in society. If this goes through, they lose their voice, they lose their choice, they lose their body. Young women will no longer be vessels for new life. They'll be instruments of war. And that's not the way our society has typically agitated this issue. Again, on the theme of war, article after article this week. Threats of war, rogue alliances and nuclear weapons, Gog-Magog war, is it on the horizon? Those are gripping headlines. Our world today is witnessing mounting threats on numerous fronts. The alignment of nations is coming together at the threat of war escalating daily, especially in Israel. They all point towards a Bible prophecy spoken in Ezekiel 38 and 39, the Gog-Magog war. Turkey is one of the nations mentioned in Ezekiel 38 and 39. 4 of the places mentioned there are in modern-day Turkey. Meshech, Tubal, Togarmah, and Gomer. We're going to be studying those tonight, actually tonight in our after service, or in our Genesis study. So today, Turkey has been sidelined by voting Western nations due to their inflammatory rhetoric about Israel and massive demonstrations in favor of Hamas during the Israeli-Gaza war. They used to be our allies. They're supposed to be our allies. Basically, they're a part of NATO, and we're supposed to have an alliance with them. But they have become Islamic, very, very much since Erdogan took over. So it is a member of NATO and has desired to join the European Union. Knowing that is unlikely to happen, they have increasingly moved eastward towards Russia in their alliances. Significantly, Turkey is now saying that it wants to become part of a BRICS economic group, whose first 5 members were Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. BRICS was founded to rival the G7 nations, and many believe it could overtake them within the next 15 years. The Kremlin welcomes Turkey's reported desire to join BRICS with open arms, of course. Speaking of Iran, because they're finding their place in Russia and Iran. Speaking of Iran, alarm bells are sounding right now. The Wall Street Journal had a headline this week that read, "Newsflash, Iran wants a bomb." Now that's obviously nothing new. They're almost being sarcastic. The Washington Post additionally published an article titled, Iran signals a major boost in nuclear enrichment at a key site. They explained that a new computer modeling program has provided a shorter runway for Iran to get nuclear weapons. Susnex, which was they were used before Israel actually ransacked, they blew it up. And basically right now Iran had nothing. Now they're right online again. Hundreds of new centrifuges would triple Iran's uranium enrichment capacity at a deeply buried underground nuclear facility, the Washington Post reported. They developed what's been called a nuclear assembly line, and they're moving briskly towards becoming a threshold nuclear power, capable of making nuclear bombs rapidly if its leaders decide to do so. Let me go back to an article before. They don't care about mutual destruction. They don't care about holding back because somebody else is going to throw their bombs and have to throw their bombs and everybody dies. They could care less about that. They want to start a nuclear war, totally different than any other nation on the planet. The alarm bells are going off about Iran's nuclear program right now, much more than at any time in the past. In fact, there's a meeting at the White House between the United States and Israeli officials this week to discuss these alarming new developments. In addition to the nuclear assembly line, Iran currently has 300 pounds of highly enriched uranium that can be further refined into weapons-grade fuel for nuclear bombs within weeks. They're at the nuclear threshold. A lot of this has been precipitated by the war between Israel and Hamas in Gaza, which Iran ultimately was the one behind. They're using their escalating conflict with Israel as their opportunity to move their nuclear program forward. Vladimir Putin last week visited Pyongyang, the capital of North Korea, for the first time ever, with many reporting that Russia could potentially run out of tanks. It seems they're appealing to outliers like North Korea, rogue nations, to help them. Many are startled by the idea of an alliance between Russia and North Korea, calling a summit that they had, meeting between the two nations, the greatest security threat to the United States since the end of the Korean War. The leader of North Korea is a rogue leader who is unpredictable in his actions, and they have had nuclear weapons that have the ability right now to reach the United States. The meeting between Russia and North Korea is a major development, adding to the power keg that's ready to explode in our world, and believe me, it really is. Another development pertains to Hezbollah, an escalating situation on Israel's northern border. Hezbollah will be one of the many peoples that are mentioned in Ezekiel chapter 38 that will be part of the Gog-Magog invasion. We're very, very close. War breaking out between Israel and Hezbollah appears to be unavoidable at this point, unless something major takes place. War would be a significant game changer and would make what's happening in Gaza with Hamas a sideshow in comparison. One of the things that's changed the calculus recently is Hezbollah's publishing, I shared this last week, footage from an Iranian-made drone they claim flew over several cities in the northern part of Israel, primarily the major coastal city of Haifa. Because of the alleged surveillance footage, many have reported that Israel is ready for an all-out war in Lebanon. A CNN headline stated, Israel warns of prospect of all-out war after Hezbollah publishes video of military and civilian sites. Times of Israel this week published an article that read, top Israeli generals approve Lebanon offensive battle plans, Army says. They already have battle plans drawn up for what's going to happen if they go into Lebanon and fight Hezbollah. All of these events are taking place right now, today. Turkey's moving more to the east. Russia and China are now with North Korea, and Iran is drawing closer to a nuclear threshold. Their proxy Hezbollah and Israel are on the brink of a major war. And they're building up and setting up for what the Bible predicts is coming in the future. You don't have to be a Bible prophecy or Bible expert to look at our world today and see that things are set up for the coming of Jesus Christ. And so what I have to add to that is, come Lord Jesus. All right, let's go into religion here for a second. What I saw at a terrorist rally outside a synagogue, this is unconscionable, but I'm going to read it to you. It's happening in America. You would think this is happening in Nazi Germany in the 1940s, but it's not. It's here. 30 minutes after Hamas supporters first set up their operation outside a Los Angeles synagogue, they maced their first Jew, and the Los Angeles police did absolutely nothing. Not until an hour into the terrorist attack and rally outside the synagogue did the LAPD finally step in, pushing back masked jihad supporters in keffiyehs, terror scarves, from the entrance of Congregational Adas Torah, Congregation of the Bible, which they had occupied. And then the mob, chanting for calls for intifada and the destruction of Israel, moved outward to target two smaller synagogues attended by Persian Jewish refugees from Islamic terror in Iran. Billions of us will come and kill you, a heavily accented Middle Eastern man in a keffiyeh rasped at me unprompted as I walked up, one of the ones who was injured said. The Jewish counter-protesters had come waving American flags and Israeli flags, while the other side was a sea of terrorist flags. A man wore an African cap, another had come in ski goggles, and another wore an Antifa cap, despite 90-degree heat, while others toted bear spray, and they used it, metal bottles, and other implements of violence. The Jewish community members included older men and women, as well as families, while Hamas contingent was mostly young and many were masked, and the Jewish people were going to church. I thought our Constitution gave you the freedom of religion. Despite knowing that a terrorist rally was planned outside the synagogue, the LAPD knew it. The LAPD had allowed the terrorist supporters to take over the entire sidewalk, leaving only a thin lane for attendees to walk through to get inside. It was a gauntlet. They had to go through this. The LAPD did little to interfere with the terrorist supporters, but did block Jewish counter-protesters from reaching their own synagogue. The police also did nothing as clumps of masked Hamas supporters broke away from the synagogue and began confronting, threatening, and attacking Jewish community members on the street. The terrorist hate rally was not an aberration. It's become the new normal. On Thursday, Hamas supporters showed up at Congregation Shariki Zedek, Gates of Righteousness, in San Fernando Valley, formerly attended by Ben Shapiro, yelling abuse at parents taking their children to school. Other Jewish schools have been similarly targeted. Why is it happening? Well, when Jews were attacked at ULCA, Democrat members of the Los Angeles County Board of Superiors passed a motion to fund legal support for the terrorist supporters. The resolution to use taxpayer money to fund legal defenses for anti-Semites was put forward by Supervisor Lindsay Horvath, who represents CD3, where the synagogue hate riot was taking place. After all the anti-Semitic violence at UCLA, the only one facing serious charges is a Jewish student. This is how America has gone upside down. And listen, I know something has to happen, so do you. It's got to come pretty soon. All right, let me give you this under moral decay. Unmasked. New docs reveal Biden's plan to remove trans surgery age limits. You heard it right. The Biden administration is not content with the idea that teens need to become legal adults before they can go under the knife to remove healthy body parts in the name of transgender identity. It also wants to hide this advocacy for mutilation of minors. Newly revealed documents expose just how radical the administration's support for experimental transgender surgery truly is. The New York Times, a top transgender leader in the Department of Health and Human Services, pressured the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, YPATH, a transgender activist group masquerading as a health organization. They asked them to drop, they actually are pressuring them to drop age limits for interventions that leave people stunted, scarred, and infertile. The interventions include experimental drugs to delay puberty, drugs to make males resemble females and vice versa, and surgeries to alter or remove body parts, healthy body parts, to make a male appear female or a female appear male. They want to drop the age limit on it. They want little children to be able to do this now. Doctors have warned about the negative side effects of these interventions. Even doctors at the leading pro-trans organization have expressed concern about them. Released late in 2021, it recommended this rule recommended lowering age limits to 14 for cross-sex hormones and 17 for genital surgeries or hysterectomies. These lower age recommendations were insufficient, however, for Rachel Levine. Remember him? Her? A man born Richard Levine, who identifies as a woman who serves as the Assistant Secretary of Health at HHS under Biden's administration, and who wants to make them lower still. He wants no age limits. Another email said Levine was very concerned that having ages, mainly for surgery, will affect access to care for trans youths and maybe adults too. Not only did Levine not push back against the idea of allowing transgender surgeries for minors, but by advocating for removing the ages. He suggests that minors at even younger ages should be able to obtain them. The fact that Levine has framed his request in political terms reveals the Biden administration's desire to cloak its support for putting minors under the knife. Levine knew this position would be unpopular and scandalous, yet he sought to advance it nonetheless, no doubt. Many people who took experimental drugs and went under the knife to affirm a transgender identity later realized their mistake and are publicly warning others against mutilating their own bodies. Doctors discussing the side effects of gender-affirming care, including cancer in teens, reduced sexual function, the lack of informed consent for procedures with lifelong impacts. Levine himself has expressed gratitude. Listen to this. Listen to how controversial and how ridiculous this is. Levine himself has expressed gratitude that he did not begin his gender transition till late in life, because otherwise he would not have been able to have children. Oh, but it's okay for others not to have them. Levine is a father of two, said in 2019 speech, "I can't imagine a life without my children." But he'll allow some young female child to go under surgery and not to have children the rest of her life. Yet Levine seems unconcerned about pushing children along the path towards sterility long before they can truly understand what it even means. Instead, Levine has attempted to enlist doctors to become evangelists for gender-affirming care and urge health officials to pressure big tech to stifle opposition to transgender orthodoxy. This latest revelation further exposes how radical the HHS has become under Joe Biden. Not only is this health agency unconcerned with the medical side effects of gender-affirming care, which is baloney, but it seeks to hide its advocacy for minor mutilation from the American people. That's your In the News.